Hi, everyone. Steve Snyder here, Artistic Director with the Twin Cities Film Fest, and so glad you're joining us for the post-film virtual Q&A. Wish we were all in person. Hopefully next year we'll be back, 2021. And I'm thrilled here. I think you'll be seeing everyone on your screen at the same time. We're here with director Ben Rickey and Professor Bill Doherty from the University of Minnesota and the co-founder of Braver Angels. And, you know, talk about a timely moment to screen this film. I'm just trying to think of someone who might have just watched this on October 30th, 4 days, 5 days before the election. When we saw this film come into the submissions, I was so thrilled to have it on an election year, in such a pivotal election year. You know, Ben, I'm just wondering if you could take us a little bit through the path of making this film, maybe any reactions you've seen as as it's screened during an intensifying election year, maybe even before the pandemic at times. You know, I'd love to start with just your thoughts.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks so much for having us at the festival, and to everyone who's watched the film and is still watching. You know, film is a communal experience meant to be shared in a dark room together. So I'm sad that we're missing this conversation in person, but thanks to anyone who stuck around to join us for this. It is a very, this is the crucible leading up to, arguably the most divisive election of our lifetimes. And we made this film, with the intention of offering a different perspective on this, which is you don't have to take a side. It's not binary. There's a way to advocate for what you believe in, but still respect people who disagree with you and find a way to work through the differences. And that, for me, I guess, came from a young age. Like, I grew up in a mixed race household. My dad is an Indian immigrant and my mom was American Episcopalian. And so I grew up going to church one weekend and temple the next. And that kind of idea of like understanding two different perspectives probably came from a young age. And it wasn't until, the 2016 election that, I wanted to see how the work I was doing could help inform the new reality that we were navigating and help us hear each other better. I think media has been used to divide us, but it can also be part of what brings us back together. And so I saw Susan Bro speak at an event in DC after the events in Charlottesville. And it was really quickly, the next month after she lost her daughter, she was able to come out the other side with this profound wisdom of needing to work through our differences to avoid further violence from happening. And it struck me like a ton of bricks. Like, I was so worked up emotionally and passionately, and it was getting the better of me, any political news. And here was someone who'd suffered the worst tragedy imaginable, who was able to come out the other side, as a voice of reason. And it struck me that there's a real lack of voices of reason these days. And it's partly the way that the media ecosystem is, designed for engagement and advertising and all those reasons. But I went up to her afterwards and I said, I don't know how or why, but I really want to help tell your story because I think you have this wisdom that could help a lot of people right now. And she was very clear on a couple of ground rules. Like, this isn't about me and my grief. Like, anytime reporters talk to me, they end up, I talk a lot about the issues. And if I cry, they just edit that out, leave that part in and just show me crying about my daughter. I don't want this to be about me and my grief. And also that you cover other people, because this is a movement. There's, and to show that there are many ways to do this. I by no means am any expert. And that was sort of the idea going into it, was like, how do we show that this mountain is something that we're all climbing, but we take different paths. They all lead to the same kind of deeper truths. And so it was really important to show multiple storylines. And that's where Mark Gerzon, the author, came into it. Ironically, off of a Google search, I had come up with the title, The Reunited States. And I was like, this is too good. Someone must already have this. And I Googled it and someone did. And not only was it the same title, it was about the same idea. And so I approached Mark and I said, you've been working on these topics for 30 years. Like, I think your, experience could really help people at this time. And so he was the one who introduced me to the three other storylines. And I got to say, Bill and the Braver Angels was an organization I came across early on in the journey. They've just developed one of the more solutions-oriented approaches to political divisions. And the idea of taking family counseling or psychology and applying it to political disagreements and divisions was just pretty revolutionary. And I think they've also done a great job of getting some press and awareness about what they're doing. And so that was what brought me to Bill, was just to understand the solutions, because it's not enough talking about the divisions. Like, we're all aware of that, and we've all, like, suffered through them to some capacity with people we care about. But how do we acquire the tools that we need as people to move past them? And so, that was why I was excited to get to know Bill and incorporate a lot of his wisdom into the storytelling.
And Professor Doherty, I mean, maybe you could talk a little bit about the founding of Blue Angels and some of what you've seen in your work. And I'm sure you must have thoughts about, I mean, talk about divisions. I mean, I don't know what words are more severe than divisions, but just as this campaign season has gone along, I mean, we're recording this the day after the FBI arrested people who were going to kidnap the governor of Michigan. And then we have another political party kind of blaming her. I mean, it's so ugly right now, very ugly. And so I forget which day we're at, October 9th. I mean, it feels max ugly right now. But I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about your work to try to, at some point we got to grapple with this and overcome it.
Well, yeah, thank you. And the connection to the film is that this is about people connecting in non-ideological ways, in human ways, with their own stories. One of the things we say in Braver Angels, by the way, Blue Angels, isn't that a song? I think you said Blue Angels there.
Did I say Blue Angels?
Yeah, you said Blue Angels.
Where's my head?
I remember those fighter pilots, the Blue Angels.
Oh, Blue Angels. I know. I was wondering if it's a song.
Braver Angels.
Braver Angels.
Braver Angels. Right. Just for the record here, okay. And what the film shows is people of goodwill who have sharp differences accessing what they have in common, which is a love for this country, a love for people flourishing, for having this be a place where we can all live and raise our families and earn a living and have good lives. And that is the case for the overwhelming majority of Americans. And so when we saw people coming from those differences and being willing to listen to the other person rather than just spew our own version of reality. So that's why I loved working with this film project, because there has to be a heart and a gut involved here. I have a colleague who uses the term in our Brave Angels work, patriotic empathy. That the reason why I will stay in relationship with you and try to listen to you is that if I don't, we're going to descend into violence as a people. It's the analogy to family is we're family here, and there is no possibility of divorce.
It's not an option.
No, I mean, are you going to leave the continent? Am I right? Are we all going to move to Canada and then we'd fight in Canada? And so we're like extended kin. We're like blood kin, right? Who there is no divorce on the table, and we can either live with hostility to each other, or we can start to connect with each other. And so that's the essence of what we try to do with Braver Angels, and the essence of the film.
Yeah, and I'm just curious on moments of breakthrough or moments of success. What tends to do best in stoking that empathy, or in provoking that empathy, or in reminding people of that empathy? I mean, do you have, when we talk about solutions and when we talk about what we can take this film and then try to, maybe some people are about to go see their families this weekend before an election where all people want to do is tell you who they're going to vote for and why you're wrong and who you're going to vote for. I mean, what's something people could take with them, or to Thanksgiving next month when we're still deciding this election in the courts, maybe? What can people, what should they keep in mind?
Well, a couple of things. And this was shown in the film. Do not try to change somebody's mind about core values and beliefs about politics. Do not try to change their mind. We have when I talk about families, I'm a family therapist. The iron rule is don't try to change another family member. You can only change yourself. Do not try to do that. Most of the bitter conversations that occur when we're each trying to get the other person to see how stupid they are. Okay, how their motivations are, how they're supporting the wrong people. So go into the conversation with this in mind. I want to try to understand this other person and where they're coming from, and I want to effectively communicate my viewpoint, and that's all. And maybe something good will come from that, but no harm will come from that.
I mean, I hear you. It's kind of like hear and be heard, right? Like I want to hear them. I want them to hear me. And so do you think some people rush to the point of trying to influence them and everything starts to shut down?
You kidding? Some people? Are you kidding? What I'm saying is revolutionary. If we're talking about the pandemic, if we're talking about Trump, I mean, it's no. We have strong opinions, and yours, my friend, are wrong. And you're fortunate enough to be in my presence where I can correct you.
You're saying that's not the best tactic for things getting done.
It tends to backfire.
Ben, I'm curious how, oh, please.
Yeah, no, I one of the important distinctions, that Bill made a moment ago is just about, us, the people, the public, and that kind of animosity and polarization, which is very different than in government or in the media. But everything we're seeing is filtered through those layers to the public. And so, politicians, political parties, their goal is to win the election, not to serve people. It's to win the next election. And so immediately they're aligned, they have a different incentive than we do. Same with the media, which is to sell advertising, to get you to read or watch as much as often as possible so that they can stay afloat as a business. And so we're always getting the most extreme views, which is not reflective of reality of like the public. And so, when we talk about this film or about political differences, I think people's minds immediately go to, well, look at what the Democrats in Congress did or the Republicans in the Senate did. And we're not talking to, and we're sort of rooting for our teams, which are, by evidence, much more divided and polarized than we are as the public. And so what I think Bill is focused on and what the film is focused on is the 330 million of us, not the 1,000 or so elected officials. Like, this is a fate that's in our hands, and it's up to us. And I firmly believe that there are more people that see what we have in common and want to move past our differences and want to avoid violence than there are on the extreme wings, which are thinking the only way to win is to defeat this enemy. And one of the lines that Bill has always said that stuck with me is like, there's this illusion that we're somehow going to vanquish the other side and they'll be gone forever, or they'll come around and see the wisdom of our side. And that's exactly that, an illusion. It will never happen. And so if we hold on to that, we're going to constantly be trying to defeat each other rather than constructively build common ground and find a path forward from there.
I'm just curious, as having made this film and then thinking through a few of the first debates we've seen. I mean, just what you're saying is really resonating with me about. I keep waiting to hear people, and maybe the last debates have been miraculous by the time people have watched this, and the campaign is on a better road.
There'll be no need for this conversation or this film anymore.
Yeah,
please.
But I keep waiting to hear kind of like, well, what are we going to build together, instead of like, what you want to do is wrong or what you have done is wrong. And like, there's this push kind of into partisan, tribalism, into our side versus your side of just power is the goal, not what you do with the power. I don't know if there's a question here other than I share the frustration that when are we going to, I get that you don't like the other person. What would you like to do if you were win presidency? What would you like to do?
Yeah, that reminds me of the very first Braver Angels workshop we did, which was a month after the 2016 election, where we got together 10 Hillary Clinton voters and 10 Donald Trump voters in Southwest Ohio for 13 hours over a weekend. And the first question I asked was, why did you accept this invitation to come here? And what they said was, right along your lines, they said, we have schools to run, roads to build, the hospitals to maintain, we are a community, and we cannot go on with this vitriol. We have to work together for the sake of this community. That's what they said. And that's what the film is about. That's what Braver Angels is about. And then we did a bus tour. We went through a whole bunch of cities and states and doing these workshops. And one of the main things I learned was that at the level of core values, aspirations, and hopes for the country, there is widespread commonality. We all want our kids to be well educated. We want everyone to have good health care. We want, you know, you have to have a national defense. We want roads that are not pothole littered, okay? Where we differ, often sharply, is on the means to get there, the policies. And many of those policy differences have been there from the beginning of the Republic. You know, the role of government, how big, how small. But what happens is we confuse the policy with the core values. And so if you're against affirmative action and I'm for it, then I assume you don't give a rip about people of color having access to equal opportunity. You don't care about them. You just want to keep them down so you can go up. Well, then I have assumed you don't share my core human values. And that is usually not the case.
You know, Ben, I'm curious, and I don't want to end this conversation without directing people to where they can go to continue the conversation, to be part of this movement, this effort to get our eyes back on the prize, if you will. But Ben, I'm sure you have a unique vantage point of how this film's either been received or conversations it sparked, or just, you know, I just can't get over that this film's been circulating during the ugliest election year in my lifetime. And I might not even know the best question to ask, because maybe you're seeing something that surprises you. You know, maybe you're seeing stuff that I wouldn't even think of ever asking. But can you tell me a little bit about what it's been like in 2020 to be the director of this film and seeing it, see people respond to it?
Yeah, well, I actually want to do the shout outs now so that we don't forget.
Yeah, sure.
For the film or any information, the simplest way is reunitedstates.tv. You can request a screening. There's more updates there. There's actually resources and links to places like Forever Angels. But I think, Bill, also, if you can just plug quickly how people can get
plug everything, because people are going to seek this out.
Yeah, Google Braver Angels, and we have workshops all over the country. They're all online now. We have national debates. We have lots of things going on. We have a project called With Malice Toward None. So let's be able to heal the country when this divisive election is over. Braver Angels, just Google it.
Yeah, which is super exciting because it brings together liberals and conservatives in the same discussion and moderates it with, you know, sort of protocols and guidelines of how to have the conversation, which people can then take back to their own lives. So the film, you know, the toughest part about this movement, I would say, not just the film, is getting the messaging across. I think, you know, there's so much passion and partisanship that we all carry, like this thick lens or this shield that we have that colors everything that we see because it's foundational to our worldview. And to pierce through that without the appearance of being, I mean, a misconception is that, you know, bridge building is being a moderate or being a centrist, which it's not necessarily. Like, you can be further left or further right, but still advocate for your point of view, but respect someone else who's doing the same thing. And also that it's a message of hope and love, which is sometimes harder to cut through than fear and anger. Especially now, like, you know, to be honest, we had originally planned to release this film before the election and realized that this is sort of a battle to the death, and maybe the best time to heal and reconcile is after an election, like it has been historically. And so we're releasing the film in January now, and the next few months are film festivals and our impact campaign. Thank you. So it'll be out on Amazon and iTunes and all those places after the first of the year. But between now and then, people that are actively interested, like, we wanted to design the film to be this 90 minutes of hope and healing that you can, like, live within, because it's not a message that's discussed in the mainstream media as often. It's not as sexy. It's not as, like, you know, it's not clickbait. It requires a little bit more work. I think the other thing about finding common ground is it's a tremendous amount of self-reflection. Like, you know, you think common ground is like, okay, when are those people going to come around and start talking or being reasonable? But just by you saying that, you've already put them as, you know, the adversary. And so the self-work that's required, or, you know, I heard this quote recently that, you know, the common ground that works is the common ground that hurts. Like, it's not comfortable to be with these feelings and to work through them and see your own blind spots and bite your tongue and, you know, go against your own primal nature. Community is grouping by love. Tribalism is grouped by hate of a common enemy. And so I think, that hard work is something that we all have to do to a certain extent, no matter which side of the political spectrum you're on. Like, even if you think you're on the right side of an issue or of history, the words you're putting online and the way you're blanketing entire tens of millions of groups of people might also be a form of prejudice or adding fuel to the fire. And so I think the hardest thing is to turn the finger around at ourselves and look in the mirror and say, wait, am I part of this problem? And if so, can I be part of the solution too?
And I know almost everyone's on social media. There's all these incentives on social media to have the hotter take, right? And to ratchet up the rhetoric. I mean, it's incentive, because you want the like, you want the share, you want the pat on the back from those who agree with you. And I don't think we think enough about how we're creating our own bubbles that we spend all day in.
Yeah, it's like The Social Dilemma, that other documentary. I think the way it applies to here is that unless you're aware of the mechanisms that are in place to trigger you, it's hard to disengage from them. So if you're keeping Fox or CNN on 8 hours a day, and it's just constantly showing the same, news clip from 20 different points of view, like over and over and over again, it's going to reinforce these worldviews without, and same with understanding what the political mechanism, who's profiting from you getting agitated? Is it a media company? Is it a political party? And are their agendas aligned with yours? Most often not. And so I think just being aware of those, and I've, tried to distance myself from social media just because of the own mental health toll that I feel like it's taken on me. Not to say it's disengaging. And Bill, you kind of talked a little bit about this, about just, the power of yourself and not letting these outside influences, reign over you. You said it in much better terms, but the idea that no politicians, can dictate our inner state, that's up to us.
Yes, if I let a politician get me into emotional disequilibrium, so that I'm having trouble sleeping, focusing, and my relationships are harmed, I'm giving that person too much power. And that may be the worst outcome that's happened, particularly in the last few years, is that we have been played. We have been played by people who purvey polarization. We've been taught to hate each other. We have a workshop called Depolarizing Within, how to detoxify myself, and then how to be an agent of depolarization in my own political community. And I talk about the 4 horsemen of polarization: stereotyping, dismissing, ridicule, and contempt for large swaths of my fellow citizens, which is different from how I might feel about, the political leader. And when we do that, we hurt ourselves and we get into emotional disequilibrium. We have trouble with our own relationships. There's a guy who took that workshop who is the most polarized guy that I had met up until that point. He gave me permission to tell this story anonymously. He owns rental property, and if he guesses that somebody is a conservative, he won't rent to them. He said they're not a protected class. It's not illegal. After the workshop, he began to actually reach out to and listen to some folks and get to know them. And he said to this one woman on the other side, he said, I learned at this workshop that there are people in power who want us to hate each other. Let's not do it.
Wow.
Yeah. And I mean, to your point about letting them live inside your head too, I mean, you will see this on social media in the middle of the night. If you go onto Twitter, people are like, is anyone else having trouble sleeping right now? I mean, it might be their most empathetic moment of the day because they're just looking for, is anyone else having as much trouble with this? But you do start to worry when, I mean, to your point about these extremes, when each party thinks if the other candidate wins, the country will fall apart. That's not a good place for all of us to be, because then you start labeling all the other supporters as, you want to destroy this country? What do you, we all are voting for a reason here.
Yeah, well, I think just the difference that Bill pointed out in that the difference between how we might feel about the individual, like the political leader, versus how we feel about the 60 million people that voted differently than us in the past election. And that's a huge difference. I think too often we group them the same and say, if you supported him, then you're a terrible person. This says something about you, and like you're enabling this awful like person to rule. And that's the dismissive part that Bill is talking about. Like there's very complicated reasons why people come around to their decisions, and also they are getting information in completely different ways than we are, and seeing many different sides of people that we might not be, or whether we agree with it or not. And they're just at a place where they might be hurting like there's a lot of like reasons why people. And so I think that kind of high, like that I'm right and you're wrong, or that if you voted for someone differently, that's also a form of prejudice. And that's something that we have responsible for, like keeping our side of the street clean, and as individuals. And our own level of anxiety and distress and sleeplessness, it takes a toll on us. I mean, this has been a tough year. Like the pandemic, this political chaos, the economic fallout, the social injustice, like it's one thing after the other. And I think we really need to just pause and take stock of like what that's doing to us emotionally. And like it's the self-care, like how can you help anyone else until you've taken care of yourself? And a lot of that is just learning how they're manipulating or triggering us for gains that like aren't necessarily in our best interest. That's been the biggest shift for me, and ways that I've been able to keep calm through some of this, and why I'm optimistic that even though it might get worse before it gets better after the election, and there's complications with how the outcome and like how long it will take to count everything, that there are many more people that want this to see peacefully resolved and move forward constructively than there are people that want to destroy things.
And I can't think of a more kind of hopeful note to end on. I mean, that's perfect. And I think, I mean, the first step is awareness, and for us to think more about this, and a good first step in that is to get more people to see this movie. And so could you just remind us on the URL again, and also if there's social feeds that people can follow, the good use of social media, so that they're aware of when it's available for rental and purchase and download? I mean, give us all the places they can go.
Yeah, the website has everything. It's www.reunitedstates.tv. And the social handles are the Reunited States for Instagram and Facebook. And for Twitter, it's just _reunited. So we'll be rolling out more and more content as the film is ready to launch. But we really hope this can be, viewing that can amplify the movement and be a start and an on-road to places like Braver Angels, because it's a journey, and it's a long one, to take. But I think most people don't even know that there is a movement, and it's exciting for us that this film can hopefully be a lightning rod. Or Van Jones has just come on board as an executive producer, which is exciting.
Wonderful.
And we're in talks with conservative media figures to join him, just to embrace the idea of bridge building at every level. But in states like Minnesota, everyone's been through so much this year, and more like politically diverse. I think a film like this might be a conversation tool.
That's what we're hoping to. And just one thing for our audience who sometimes they just don't understand really important things in the industry. I mean, the more you like a Facebook page, the more, when it gets released on digital, the more you can watch it that first week, the more you can leave reviews and give it scores. And if you're passionate about it, a high score, these things matter for the reach of a film. It's no small thing. A Facebook like, no small thing. An iTunes review, in the timing of your iTunes purchase or other platform, can really mean a lot for how far and wide a film gets. So, I mean, I just want to thank you both for taking time out of your days to talk with us. I wish we were in person, and I wish we were heading over to the festival lounge right now to have a drink and talk about how our country will be okay. But for now, I guess we'll leave it there. So, I mean, thanks to you both.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us, Steve, and for everyone at the festival. Thanks for sticking around, and keep hope alive.
Keep hope alive. So thank you to Ben for directing. Thank you to Professor Doherty for Braver Angels, and hope everyone enjoyed the film. Thanks so much.